it's a video that's about the human being who's purchasing a house, right?
To be honest with you, I don't even know if she was the realtor. I just assumed because she was the one that handed the keys in such a fashion that it looked like she was the realtor.
She's actually a locksmith. It was just a rekey.
You talk about it privately. We talk about it publicly. This is the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. Welcome again to the Real Estate Insiders Unfiltered podcast. I'm your host, James Twiggins, along with my co-host and partner in crime, Mr. Keith Robinson. Mr. Crazy Uncle Keith.
Yes,
I got it right this time. We had a repeat guest, Mr. Brian Boero. He's the co-founder at 1000 Watt Consulting, probably one of the top branding and marketing and advertising firms in our space. He's wicked smart. Tell our viewers and listeners what we talked about today, because it was juicy.
It was. We got to have a fun conversation where we made Brian the branding czar, the communication czar for NAR, a brokerage, and an agent. And he unpacked for us what he'd do. Imagine having one of the industry's best consultants around communication and just sharing what he would do, what he would say, and why. The power of speaking to the moment, the power of storytelling. He goes deep on all these topics. It was phenomenal. You'll have to listen to know exactly his thoughts, and it's great.
Tune in, kids. It's gonna be amazing.
Put it in your ears.
Brian, welcome back to the podcast. We are very excited to talk to you about this particular topic. I know in the hallways of all the conferences that we pass each other in, there certainly is no shortage of thoughts on communications and media strategy in the industry.
Well, there might not be enough communications going on. If I take a look at what's happening, perhaps more should be had.
Which we're going to focus this podcast on today. I'm pretty sure most people know you, but Brian, let's just start real quick. Just give them a little bit about your background, and then specifically around 1000 Watt and why we're having you on to talk about communications and media and branding and all the things that tie together. So
sure. Well, guys, thank you for having me. I'm a big fan of what you're doing. You're really good at it. So thank you.
Thank you.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm Brian Boero. I've been around this business for 27 years in media and marketing technology. I'm co-founder at 1000 Watt. We're a strategy and creative agency that works across the residential real estate business with brokers and brands and mortgage lenders and home builders, all of those things. And we help companies or brands figure out what's good or unique or powerful about them and then express that in the world. So that's, in a nutshell, what I do every day.
There's literally no one better that I can think of to have this conversation with, because this is your bread and butter and like what you guys think about and do every day. So excited about this conversation.
Well, I think both of you have been pretty vocal in communicating around the communications or the lack thereof over the last, let's call it a year, on the issues that have sprouted up around the NAR and the industry. And, I've expressed my opinions, and it's become something of a cottage industry within the industry, hand-wringing criticism, armchair quarterbacking, all that type of stuff. And so I'm going to try to be constructive here because, ultimately I care. It matters. It's high stakes. I'm somebody who cares about home ownership in this industry, and my criticism comes from that place, as I know yours does.
Yeah. Well, and for backstory, Brian and I were sitting in an airport waiting for a plane because we live not far from each other, and we were just talking about just frustrations around the narrative in the business today and just how inaccurate so much of it is, and then just candidly how little the industry is talking, or it is, and it's talking about the wrong things. So just for the viewers and listeners, I asked Brian to come on and since he is an expert in this, to really share a perspective. And we're going to cover 3 topics today, just for context. Just, if we were the, I don't know, what should we call them? The industry communications and media czar, or whatever the new government term is. What would you do if you were in charge of NAR's comms, which I think is a good conversation for everyone to have, because it's important what they're doing. The work that they do is important. And then also brokerages, so that, companies can listen to this and have some actual tangible things to walk away with. And then agents, where I know you'll want to focus quite a bit of time there on what to be talking about and not be talking about. So I guess let's start with that, Brian. I mean, you've done some incredible work. I know you work with some of the biggest brands, some of the stuff you guys do. And just real quick for the viewers and listeners, we'll have a link in the show notes to 1000 Watts so you can see some of the incredible work product they've done. But let's start with NAR. And as you pointed out constructively, we are where we are today. We don't need to rehash the lawsuits or any of that. But let's just go, what needs to change or happen today forward? You're in charge. Go.
Sure. Well, I think we need to exit a defensive stance or a self-justifying stance. And I think that's where, in my observation, the NAR got stuck very early on. From the beginning, the stance was responsive and defensive and self-justifying, and it was not confident and proactive and emotional in the right ways. And then once the blows started coming, there was a sense of, I think, incredulity, disbelief. How could this happen? We're the National Association of Realtors. And that sort of led into this spiral that the organization is still trying to climb out of. You know, I think about a movie you guys probably know, and many of your listeners have, Monty Python's Holy Grail movie, where there's the Black Knight, right? The scary Black Knight.
Not dead yet.
Not dead yet. And Arthur chops off one arm, then the other arm, and then both legs. And the whole time the knight, up until the point where he's just a bleeding stub, says, "It's but a flesh wound."
Yeah.
The Black Knight is invincible. Yeah. So there was, I think, a little bit of disbelief, maybe even a little bit of institutional hubris around that, where if they just thought we can repeat the same thing over and over, that local broker marketplaces are competitive, and if we do what our PR firm and what our lawyers say we should do, it's all going to be okay. And of course, it wasn't okay, and it's still not okay.
Right.
So to exit that, I think really it has to start with a question. And that question is, why are we advertising? Why are we communicating? Towards what end? Okay. Now, if we think about the advertising, first of all, okay, some $30 million a year, I think, is the figure that's getting spent on that advertising, right? And like, so many people have trashed that ad campaign, and many people think it's been more or less the equivalent of throwing $30 million into an oil drum in a vacant lot and lighting it on fire.
Sounds like a good Friday night.
Yeah, right. No one seems to have asked the question, why are we doing this? Why? What is the purpose of this investment? And I would say that in order to answer that question, really honestly, you have to come to some harsh realities. So the answer cannot be, we are spending $30 million a year to build the Realtor brand.
Right.
Because the Realtor brand, in my view, does not exist. Yeah. That is not a brand. And I can talk to you about why I think that's true.
Let's go down that road. Let's do it.
Okay. Well, look, in my view, and there are lots of ways to define a brand, and most of them are BS, but really, fundamentally, the simplest way that I think about it is a brand is a promise. And McDonald's makes us a promise. Starbucks makes us a promise. BMW makes us a promise. And the problem with NAR, and in fact, the problem with a lot of our industry, is it's very hard to make promises in this business. And it's very hard to make promises and keep promises in this business because of the way we're structured, right? We are a big, unruly family of 1.5 million independent contractors within franchise structures, within brokerage and office structures, with associations. Like, we can't really make promises that we can deliver on. It's really hard to do that, okay? So the NAR can't make promises on behalf of its members, really, that are credible, okay? So it's just part of my answer. But so you can't say you're doing it to build the Realtor brand. You can't really say it that you're spending $30 million a year to throw red meat to your members to please them. So when they turn on the TV, they can see an ad that talks about their profession.
Do you think that's what do you think that's the objective with that?
I think maybe that's part of the rationale, would be my guess. Okay. I think it's to build the realtor brand, which I think is folly. I think it's in an effort to throw some red meat to the members, which you see large franchise brands do all the time, right?
Yeah.
You see the big Super Bowl ads. Right, exactly. But the reality is, and we've done some research then on ourselves, and the numbers are pretty bleak. 86% of 1,100 agents that we surveyed said they would not be members of the NAR if their broker didn't make them, or they had to do so to get access to the MLS and the lockbox. Like there's no red meat that any one of those members is going to consume. And then thirdly, you could say, well, maybe we do this to influence policymakers, legislators. Okay, if that's your answer, that might make sense, but I think that calls for something different than, brand advertising on television to the tune of $30 million. So anyway, ask yourself why you're doing this, first of all, and be honest in the answer. And then the second thing is, and this is true, I think, of all advertising, is there something in the world that is painful or wrong that you can maybe make better? Okay. Think about a better world. So if we think about that in the context of real estate, right now, there's a lot of pain around housing. Sellers are stuck. They're frustrated. Buyers are really frustrated. We have historic affordability problems.
Yeah.
The real estate market is an arena filled with pain and frustration, right? So can we speak to that moment? Can the National Association of Realtors, who at its finest is an advocate for the transformational possibilities of home ownership, talk about how its members can address that pain in this moment? Can we speak to that crisis, that problem with the world? My answer is yes. You can't do it with That's Who We Are. You can't do it necessarily with actors. You can't necessarily do it with an ad campaign shaped and sanded of all of its rough edges and beauty by a committee. You can't do that, okay? You have to come at it differently. And so what I would like to see really is speaking to the moment. Can the National Association of Realtors, through its members, speak to the moment? And I'll suggest a couple of examples maybe you guys know. So do you remember the Halftime in America ad from Chrysler in 2012?
No.
I don't.
You're too young. Okay.
Yeah.
So
this is Super Bowl.
Super Bowl
Yeah,
ad.
halftime I'm way trash by then, but yeah. So well, I'm being honest.
You
Like
don't remember it. Yeah,
I
you're
don't
black.
remember. I probably saw it, but yeah.
Yeah. So watch it on YouTube and you'll see what I mean. Okay. It was just as we were getting up off the floor from the great financial crisis.
Yeah.
The auto industry had been bailed out. We had this crisis of confidence in America.
Yeah.
Watch the ad, right? Narrated by Clint Eastwood. It's Halftime in America.
Oh, I
remember
remember
it
this
now.
now. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And that's what I'm talking about. If
Yeah,
want
give
an
you
example-
goosebumps. It's you got goosebumps from it. Yeah.
It'll give you goosebumps every single time.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's Chrysler, the crappy cars, right? The Chrysler gave me goosebumps because it spoke to the problem in the world.
Yeah.
It involved itself in the solution to that problem. I think the National Association of Realtors has an opportunity to do that. We have a home ownership crisis. We have a home selling crisis. And when home ownership and housing isn't healthy, people aren't healthy.
Yeah.
Our culture isn't healthy. Our economy fundamentally isn't healthy. Speak to that,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Not with just veterans and pregnant people and families and downsizers. Speak to it honestly. That's how I would approach it at a high level.
You know, I saw a video. It was on Instagram, and it was 30 seconds. And it was a young woman. She was maybe 13, 14. It was obviously her and her father. And they're out in front of a house, and she starts crying because the father said, "Yeah, the house got sold." And she starts crying because she wanted the house, and they kind of pan away. And the next minute she goes, "Well, it's sold because your dad bought it." And She turned to this is the realtor, just hands her the keys. It wasn't, this was all, by the way, not planned. It was a very spur of the moment reaction. And she just like started crying. It's like, you got it. And she like hugged her father. I mean, as a father, we all know what this is like. And it was, I sat there and go, that's the ad.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's the ad. There's nothing, you don't need to do anything else. Just put that up there.
That is
all you did was you handed the keys to them, and it was brought to you by, it was apparent it was a realtor. You say nothing and you just let the emotions speak.
Yeah.
And
you do. And honestly, if I were to get more specific, I would let the members speak, because that reality you just spoke about, James, that happens
every day,
1,000 times a day. Right. My wife sells real estate. I can't tell you the stories that she has told me about getting people into homes in the San Francisco Bay Area, kind of against the odds. Like, it is an act of heroism. And the skill that it took to do that, for a good practitioner to do that, is like, there's nothing better than that. And you cannot communicate that through, that's who we are. What does that even mean? That's who we are.
Yeah, to your point, it's almost giving the red meat. It's just for the people to hear it. And I'll go a step further. I worry that there's 1,030 board members or something like that, some number for NAR. It's almost like, and I want to be clear with my statement, I'm not ragging on NAR. I mean, there's problems over there.
You always say that, right?
Well, but it's important because I want to make sure I understand that I'm not a person saying people should leave NAR. Like, I don't fall in that camp. I actually think there needs to be things that need to be fixed over there. There's a big purpose to NAR. But I feel like they're just listening to the 1,030 people that show up to the meetings, versus your point of like, do surveys of people in the field, and the commentary is very different than when you talk to an association board member versus the practitioner that's just trying to get from one day to the next. It's like two different planets. Well,
institutions take on a life of their own when they reach a certain scale or age, right? So you can have an organization of very well-intentioned people, but the institutional dynamics are such that they take on a physics of their own. So it's 1,000 board members, it's committees, it's people, running for leadership positions 10 years in advance and politicking all the way up. I mean, everything is set up to make it very hard to respond in a moment of crisis, which is what we've seen over the last year. It's tough. And so how do you break out of that pattern? I don't know. You need to take some risks, and somebody needs to fall on their sword or break some things. I think that's the only way to break out of this spiral that the organization finds itself in. Which, by the way, I hope it gets out of it too.
Yeah, I have a comment on I think it was Facebook or wherever you saw it, James. Instagram, and then I'll also just for the auspices of a thoughtful podcast, I'll steel man some questions for maybe, if I was running NAR, why that would feel weird to do what you're proposing. But I think what's important to note about what you said, James, is that's actually not a video about the real estate professional or the real estate profession, right? It's a video that's about the human being who's purchasing a house, right? And so I think if you're going to go there, you got to go all the way there. And almost go all the way down to the story of the human being who's buying a house, and the real estate agent is just the caretaker of that experience and the nurturer of making sure that happens the right way.
To be honest with you, I don't even know if she was the realtor. I just assumed because she was the one that handed the keys in such a fashion that it looked like she was the realtor. So
she's actually a locksmith. It was just a rekey. Okay, but now
it was a squatter.
Yes. Is there an example of a trade organization? I can't think of one, but that doesn't mean it doesn't exist, but that's sort of leapfrogging, promoting the organization, right? Like that is, I think, a somewhat radical leap that I can't think of a trade organization that's done that. They usually are.
Well,
it doesn't mean it shouldn't be done.
I have another example that's close, but I want to address this issue first of as you suggest, leapfrogging the member to go to the consumer. But what we need to do, the order of business right now is to get people to think differently about real estate professionals. Because right now, Generally speaking, it was kind of mixed, right?
Yeah.
Lots of sort of reputational bad energy going on there. Since October, and then since 2 months ago, with the media explosion, the popular consciousness has like been activated in all these bad ways. And
I
so,
do agree, but just to push back for a little debate, right? I agree with all that. And, real estate agents, when you do the ranking of trusted salespeople, they always rank near, in the bottom or whatever. But at the same moment, when you ask the client the experience that they had with the real estate professional, they love their real estate professional. Right?
Yeah.
Like that experience with the human, it's almost like this completely bifurcated reality where, real estate agent gets put in this box, but not my agent. My agent's different. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But that is the reality that the person goes through.
It is. And I'll tell you what we found through a lot of our research over the last 6 months with buyers.
Yeah.
Yes. 85-90% of people who come through that experience say, hey, I love my agent. I'd refer them. I'd use them again. Of course, we all know very few of them do.
Right.
What we also find is that when you sort of introduce different framing and say, well, maybe you don't really need to use a real estate agent to buy a home. What about this and this? They crumble pretty quickly. Okay.
So it's brittle.
It's brittle.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting.
So that affinity, that sort of afterglow that comes after a transaction kind of fades quick. And so what has happened over the last 6 months is because of the media explosion and the ensuing social media explosion of realtor hatred, people have started to think about realtors in a way that is, from the NAR's perspective and from anybody that's in this industry's perspective, not favorable.
Right.
Okay? So the job is to get people thinking differently about real estate professionals right now.
Yeah.
And how you do that is you show how these real estate professionals address a pain or a problem in the moment that people in the world are feeling. And you could do that through that example that you shared, James. You could do that by showing real estate professionals talking about how they transform lives. It's not rocket science.
Yeah.
You just need to stop doing the stupid stuff.
Well, and look, I'm doing the best I can to steelman NAR here, which is actually, I'm in full agreement with both of you. So I'm it's not easy for me to do, but I could say if I were NAR, like, okay, sure. Yes, we hired actors, but that's what we tried to do with the explaining how we shepherd people through this transaction and all the things of a real estate agent. So are you saying that it's too scripted and
With all due respect, Keith, I've watched all the ads. Okay.
Me too.
Okay. You're going to hang your hat on some glossy, smoothed over notion of expertise.
Yeah.
Dude, that's not going to do it.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you got to do the ad about we're a community builder. There's the ad where the woman helps a woman start a business. Then you got to do the ad for the commercial people. Otherwise, the commercial people will scream that they're not getting enough love. Yeah. And again, it's an input of a structure or an institution that I don't think is built to meet this moment.
What stops companies or industry or NAR or whoever, because there is this sort of a dearth of vulnerability and authenticity, right? I think that's why the things like James mentioned and these other experiences that we're talking about resonate so deeply, is because it feels real in a world full of fake. How do you do that? Like,
well, you recognize the truth that sits out in the world and in the heart of your customer. I'll give you an example. Okay. Forget about whatever feelings you have about Zillow.
Sure.
So one of Zillow's latest TV ads,
they're brilliant,
showed the process of a mother and daughter trying to buy a home.
It was so good.
And what they did, which is exactly what I'm talking about, is they showed how hard, difficult, trying, crushing it is to buy a home right now in the United States of America. And they showed that. And they did it with actors. But it was beautifully composed.
Oh, I got emotional.
And that reason that ad was effective is because it recognized what's going on in the world, and it recognized what's going in the heart of its potential customer.
And it was willing
that's all NAR needs to do.
Yeah.
And it was willing to not be sterilized, right? To your point. Like, I feel
and
like,
by the way, the commercial had a happy ending.
Sure.
It was honest on the way there.
Oh,
Yeah.
No, it was, you were like rooting for him at the end, and you were actually depressed going, are they going to get a house? This sucks. I feel for them. And then
it's really,
they land.
Sorry, James. Yeah. It's the difference between doing a commercial and telling a story, right?
Yes.
Like a story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And
but that's why that ad felt real, Keith.
Right.
Like, it had the ring of truth.
Yeah.
You know, just to add to comment on this. So my friends, Jamie and Brian, he's a professor at UC Berkeley. She's the head of quantum computing at IBM. Yeah.
Jeez. Got any more names you want to drop?
No, but the reason I'm sharing the story was they've been trying to find a house. They're working with one of my very good friends here in the Bay Area. He's an amazing broker. And they went up on a house. They got it for less than the other offers, but because of just how this particular broker did things, knew things, how to structure the offer, work through the process. They were at our daughter's three-year-old birthday party, and she goes, "Thank you." I was like, "For what?" She goes, "He's amazing, and I don't give a shit how much money it would have cost to pay him. We would have never," her words, by the way, "we would have never gotten that house. Never gotten it had we not had somebody who's done this so much, who understood the process and guided it." Now, I want to be very clear. We're talking about a professor from UC Berkeley and the head of quantum computing for IBM. These are really intelligent people. Yeah. The few people you think would go out on their own and do this.
Yeah.
And she was emotional because she has a 3-year-old as well. And she's like, "We got this place. It's going to be where we're going to spend the rest of our life." I mean, it was just that. Like that. That's all it needs to be. Just those stories.
Yeah, I mean, there's a truth there. And I will say, because you asked about both the communications effort and the advertising, and I kind of glommed onto the advertising. But look, I started by saying that the institution and really the industry as a whole put ourselves in a defensive stance, okay? And meanwhile, because we were being called a cartel. They talk about effective framing and communication.
Talk about telling a story.
I mean, look, props to Ketchmark, right?
Sure,
I mean, look, he did his job.
Yeah.
I mean, he ran a clinic on how to frame things and get people to think about something a certain way.
He was a step ahead on everything.
It was a step ahead. But see, the response, and this is the big whiff, and we should just make sure we never do it again. Okay? The response should have been, "Are you kidding me? A cartel?" The real estate business, the real estate practice, a career in real estate is the greatest engine of social and economic mobility our economy has ever created. It is the most small C capitalist Main Street version of what it means to be business and business people in America. It is the opposite of a cartel. It is diverse. It is welcoming. It lifts people up who would not otherwise be able to attain their station in society and in our economy. Are you absolutely kidding me? Have you met the realtors who live in your neighborhood, who are in your family? Give me a break. And it should have been an offensive argument.
Yeah.
But it never was. It was defensive.
That's what happens when lawyers are making decisions, unfortunately. I've said that a lot. It has to be, lawyers' jobs are to advise, and then leadership has to make calls. And it's almost like it paralyzed the industry too, because that was the other thing, and we'll get to brokers and agents in a moment, was just the commentary was just, "We're not going to talk about it. We're not going to talk about it." And I'm going, well, they're going to talk about it. Like, I guarantee you they're going to be out there with a megaphone trying to win over the consumer. And we all know how courtrooms work, by the way. Like, it's all a show. It's a game of getting, it's theater, to your point, Keith, of getting the jury to buy into the performance. And if you can play that, if you got all your commercials leading up to the actual show, people come in with an expectation. And we were not playing that game from theater. You know,
we were back on our heels. Nobody was saying anything, and it created a vacuum. And if you don't tell your story, somebody else will. And somebody else told the story.
All right, I have one question before we move on to brokerages. This is a wild one, so tell me if I'm stupid, and I won't be offended by it. Should NAR think about trying to become more of an association that's not just for realtors, but for homeowners, as an example? meaning we shift the advocacy thought away from just practitioners to actual people who own property. That currently what we're advocating for is to help homeownership in this country. But what if we opened up that pool greater? I know it sounds really crazy, but I'm just throwing it out there.
I don't think it's crazy. In fact, I think that idea has been floated at various points in the past of creating something of an adjunct membership where you as a homeowner could join the NAR. It's like the AARP, for example.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
Great.
yeah, look, I think there's something to that. I think anything should be on the table. And, and I don't say this like glibly or cavalierly, but the whole settlement thing, they preserved the institution. The settlement preserved the institution, but I'm not sure that bankruptcy would have been the worst outcome because it would have forced a restructuring and it may have forced some of the ideas like you put onto the table. So, yeah, why not? I mean, I think there has to be a real reckoning and soul searching here.
Okay. Let's do this. Give us like the 3 talking points of what you would do today if you were the head of comms and media for NAR. Like if Brian was in charge, you had $30 million. I know we talked about the consumer piece, but like what would you, like if they hired 1,000 watt, by the way, NAR, you should, if they hired 1,000 watt, what would you do today
other
to shift
than
that?
the really big budget for a particular podcast? Which would be the best place to advertise if anyone's listening. All right, continue.
Yeah,
all that advertising we do.
None of our ads.
Yeah. What would you do? Give a 3-point process. What do you think? What would you do? How would you change it?
I think, first of all, we need to structurally change how messaging and communication and advertising and storytelling gets done, because I think that's problem number 1.
Okay.
The annual campaign gets announced every year by the head of the committee who is running the committee that does the advertising, and then the CMO or the responsible party on staff. And it's just, you need to restructure how storytelling gets done. And then secondly, I think you need to really think about how you can create a connection based on truth and understanding with your target audience. And whether that's speaking candidly to your members, or as we've been talking about, speaking to the general public, what is the truth that we can connect with, and what is the reality that we can tap into out in the world? And then thirdly, in terms of the format, you need to play against type here. So the National Association of Realtors, for better and for worse, insides and outside the industry and the media, we've seen it over and over again, is marked as a ham-fisted, tone-deaf, lumbering institution. So the tonality and the formats through which the story is communicated needs to play against that typecasting. And that gets into exactly how you do it and where you do it. So I would start from those questions, or those
really good starting points.
Yeah.
Starting points, right? I can't be totally prescriptive,
Sure.
but
No,
I would
they're
ask those
valid.
questions.
Yeah.
And I have seen, Kevin's here is the president of NAR. I've seen him trying.
He is trying.
Yeah,
He gets,
for sure.
he gets a lot of credit. He's trying really, really hard.
Yeah.
So-
And I know
Yeah.
he still gets smashed anytime he posts anything.
Yeah, no, he gets roasted constantly, but
Yeah.
I appreciate, speaking about tonality
Yeah.
and approach and humility, I think he's hitting a lot of the right notes.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
he's dealing with flack internally. Like there's no scenario where he's not going up against the machine. And Kevin, if you're listening, keep doing what you're doing, buddy.
Yes, right,
the
thanks.
industry needs it. You keep going down that path. All right, let's switch it. So let's go to brokerages and then we'll go to agents. Same question. So where would you start? How would you approach it?
Well, I've always said that marketing and brand building fundamentally is about saying what your competitors are unwilling or unable to say, and doing what they are unable or unwilling to do, right? And if you think about those things, therein lies your opportunity. And so right now, if you're a brokerage or you're an agent, whatever your role in this business is, like there are a lot of people who are hunkered down, right? They're scared. They don't know what to say. They worry about saying the wrong thing. They worry that speaking proactively to all of the noise that's out there is going to scare clients away.
It's almost, sorry, Brian, but it reminds me of how they approach, like oftentimes they don't want to call a client till they have all the answers, right? Yeah. They don't want to call a client and say, all right, here's the situation. I think I got a pretty good handle on it. I got a few more phone calls to make, right? And so I see a lot of real estate brokerages, they're afraid to be early and wrong. They'd rather be late and like concretized, and it's not there yet, right? Yeah. And so if someone agrees with you and believes that, how do you push through that wiring that's made you successful for so much of your career in building an office, and right? Like, how do you push through that?
I think silence is the worst thing right now. And I think what we've learned over the last year is if you create a vacuum, it'll get filled for you. Yeah. So we can't keep just leaving the vacuum in existence. What that means, for example, okay, it does not mean as a realtor that you should film a video in your car with you ranting against the media and trial lawyers.
That's not good.
That's not what I mean by this. What I mean by this is to step towards this conversation. Hey, buyers, everything's kind of changing right now. And there are some questions, and there's some questions specifically about how I or we get paid. Let's talk about it.
Yeah.
And we'll walk you through the details. Mm-hmm. I see very few brokers actively communicating in that way. And if they don't, they're missing a big opportunity, because out there in consumer land, people are like, yeah, what is that thing I read about in the Wall Street Journal? What's going on? Do I need to pay a realtor anymore? So you're actually serving people by speaking about it actively. And then for the agent community, agents are really looking for leadership right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Really desperate for leadership and clarity and confidence. And if you can speak to the moment, like proactively with your brand and through your organization, like, what an opportunity.
Yeah.
And, I think that's kind of the miss and the opportunity.
The piece I'd add to that is, I think sometimes people are afraid to step out because they're worried they're going to be wrong, quote unquote wrong. Right.
Yeah.
And how about this as a different, you're definitely going to be wrong because you're early, but you're not going to be 180 degrees wrong. You're not going to be the opposite of right. You're just not going to have complete information or completely right because it's still evolving. Yeah. But there's a difference between right and wrong, right? You can be mostly right, and that is good enough to start the process.
You also have to, just for what it's worth, when we started this podcast, we were like, oh God, what are people going to say? What are they going to do? You also just get used to the fact that the reality is nobody has a crystal ball, and you're going to do the best you can with the information you have at that point in time. Yeah. We've been wrong on a lot of things. I'm sure if we went back 58 episodes or how many episodes we've done, we'd be like, oh shit, got that wrong. But to your point, Brian, nobody was talking about these lawsuits at all. Nobody was, and everyone was like, I can't believe you're talking about it. I was like, we're all going to get sued. So like, you're going to change the outcome. Like, so like somebody needs to step up and say something. On your comment, should they be talking to the media? Should people be outwardly trying to communicate with local media and have a conversation?
Yes. But most importantly, you should be speaking to your customer. Mm. So let me give you an example. I often do this a lot. I have a slide where I show like a grayed out wireframe of a real estate website. Mm-hmm. And it has a search box in the middle where you can search homes. And it has an agent's link at the top, a buying link, and a selling link. And that's it. And that is 99.9% of all real estate agent and brokerage websites in the United States of America. Yeah. What that is like, it's a blank stare out into the marketplace to your consumer, and you're saying nothing. Maybe, just to take that one touch point, you now take an opportunity to say, hey, listen, you maybe have thought about this, or maybe you've heard about this. The way we work together is changing. Here's what that means. Mm. That's all I'm talking about. Yeah, it's just confidently speaking to something that's already out there in the world.
When it can even be, here's what that means today as I know it. right?
Right.
Yeah. This doesn't, it's not, here's what this means, like some Newtonian equation, for physics. This is an evolving thing.
No. And look, you guys made the point for me. And I'm not just saying this to butter you up, but like, look, you guys both work in this business, okay? You have a stake in this, but you have been out there speaking about this loudly and often, and maybe you've been wrong on a few things, as we all are.
Yeah.
And but people don't remember that. What they remember is that you were speaking to something that they were feeling and that was out there. That's all they remember, and that's the essence of telling a story. It's the essence of leadership. And what a tremendous opportunity locally, nationally, in the neighborhood. We shouldn't miss it.
Do you have I'm going a little left turn here, but I want to tap into that consulting media brain of yours. Do you have a process that you like, let's say, okay, I've heard you, I'm listening to this, like, damn it, I got to do that. Brian's right. Is there a process that you teach people for how to tap in or touch into that?
Really good question.
Yeah. Well, look, I'll tell you, marketing and communications and advertising is part science and part psychotherapy. What I mean by that, and I am answering your question, the process is pretty straightforward, okay? This is the ABC and the 1, 2, 3 of marketing and communications and advertising.
Perfect.
Okay? Speak to your customer. That could be just one-on-one, or like we do tons of survey research and focus groups where we're talking to the customer. Listen to them, and then based on what they tell you, form hypotheses, right? Ideas about how to connect with them and move them. Then put those into the world, test them,
see what happens.
Iterate, rinse and repeat. That's the process.
Yeah.
So pretty straightforward. And I'll give you just something concrete here.
Thank you.
That reflects that. So in our research with buyers, we've been doing this research for almost 3 years, but have focused a lot on buyers just in the last 6 months for obvious reasons. And we ask the same question 10 different ways because we want to get a real clear signal, because for the most part, consumers don't know what they don't know and don't really know what they want. So we have to ask the question a lot of ways. But what we were able to suss out is that there are 2 things that people value about a buyer's agent. And number 1 is to de-risk the deal. I'm doing something big, scary. I'm probably putting all of my chips onto the table to buy a house. I cannot screw it up because it will ruin my life. Help me de-risk this deal. That's number 1. Number 2, help me not pay too much.
Right.
I am putting all of my chips onto the table. Tell me what is enough to pay to get this house, but tell me also what is too much. Tens of thousands of dollars hinge on that question, and therein lies the value of a good buyer's agent. So if you know that's what your customer is telling you, then there's your marketing. Right. It's all right there. Tell that story.
Should agents right now be putting in their presentations a page talking point to address these settlements proactively? Meaning, instead of waiting for the question to come, let's talk about what you're hearing on the media. Like, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I absolutely think so. I don't think it's, if we look at this at an agent level as objection handling, then I think we whiffed it. And we've also missed an opportunity.
No, it's education.
The discussion. Yeah. It's not objection handling.
Right.
It is informing people and shaping the story and telling how you play a part in it.
Yeah. Every agent that's listening, every agent I don't know about the world, but certainly every agent in America has been trying to figure out, for decades, calling their sphere of influence. Like, this is the best time ever. Like, just call your past clients and have a thoughtful conversation about what is going on, because it is at the forefront of their mind like no other because of all the headlines and everything else. Yeah. Like, just maybe it's I don't know. I read a lot of Stoicism, right? But if you think about Stoics, they used to just sit on the porch and talk. Like, that's where it came. That's the origin of it. Like, just have a porch conversation, even if you're driving, but just sit down with people and talk to them.
Yeah.
All right. Well, for the last few minutes here, Brian, tell us, what do you think this looks like in the next few years without this new strategy you're referring to? Like let's go down two roads. We deploy a better strategy. Now let's go to both.
Tell
we
us
do
two
this,
stories, Brian.
Yeah, tell us two stories. Like what Brian's crystal ball, you've been in this a long time. If we continue down the road we're going, what does it look like? And if we go down this road of controlling that narrative and being at the forefront, not controlling, but just being part of that narrative and having those conversations, what does that look like in, let's say, 24 months? Because it's really, I don't know, I feel like the next 24 months is going to be a lot. So
it's going to be a lot. And, look, I always say I'm not going to predict what's going to happen because I don't know better than you guys or anybody else who's watching this. But I'm really clear on what I want to happen.
Okay.
I'm clear on that, so I'll speak at it from that point of view. So here's what I don't want to happen. I don't want for nothing to change because I don't think that sort of small scale, Main Street, mom and pop, independent contractor real estate is going to survive just muddling through as we are. So what I don't want to happen is for us to kind of hack our way through this, maybe figure out workarounds from the settlement that probably get us in more trouble than we're already in. I don't want the NAR to continue to be self-satisfied and always hope that the law of large numbers will save them. And I hope that something comes of this where the NAR and everybody who's in this industry who cares about it looks at what we can do to create an industry that is smaller, smarter, and worthy of the best of what we do. I mean, that's what I hope. And, it could go either way. And it's...
and it could go a middle path too, right? Like, yeah. I just think... I do respect the 24-month question because you got to frame it somehow, but change is hard. The bigger the organization, the slower the change. It can go faster, whatever fast means for NAR, but it's about, I'm more focused on trajectory than outcome, right? Is it moving in that direction? Are they becoming less teleprompter and more, telephone, tell a friend, right? And if they continue that trajectory, I think that they will weather this as well as they can. But it's you got to start.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it's more than just communications and optics too.
Right. Yeah.
The root problem, and we all know that. When I say, the law of large numbers and NAR always placing its bet there. Look, when I said at the beginning of this discussion that it's very hard for the NAR and very hard for many of us in the real estate industry to make promises, it's because, we have to deal with the fact that we have at least 500,000 people in this business who shouldn't be in this business.
Yeah.
And that we let that happen. Mm-hmm. And that's what makes it hard to make promises because we can't, those checks are not
the quality. Yeah. The quality of service can vary.
And that is the rot that sits at the heart of this thing. And what I'm hoping is that this moment is a catalyst for really changing that and getting it right. That's what I hope happens. I don't know if it will happen, but that's what I hope happens.
Do you think it will? Like, given the reality of the discussions that are going to happen, there's going to be the more skilled and the less skilled at having that conversation, right?
I think it could happen. If I'm honest, I think that reality may be forced upon us rather than us creating
I'm with you.
So you can either create the future or have it created for you. And I feel like that smaller, leaner industry is going to maybe be forced upon us in ways we don't want.
Yeah. And you'll have people who get it and they're going to capture market share. You have people who don't.
Yeah.
They're going to lose market share.
So,
It'd be interesting to watch. It's funny because it was a whole, we can do a different pod on this, but it's what happens in the world if NAR loses its power in DC. And it was a great quote I had. I don't remember exactly, but it's basically the person I was talking to was like, well, imagine a world where the government's making all the decisions for the industry and they're not being held in check. And I was like, that's a scary world. So, there's so many different channels to this discussion. Well, Brian,
I got one question before we wrap.
Okay.
If that's okay. And this is totally off topic, but you've talked so much today about storytelling, the power and importance of storytelling. Do you have a book recommendation
that's a good one. Yeah.
or a podcast? I know we usually ask this in the rapid fire, but if someone has I believe you and I got to get better at storytelling, where would you send them?
God,
I know.
I don't have a book on storytelling. I'll tell you, I could give you advertising books, but honestly, read stories.
Yeah.
Honestly, the best thing you can do to learn how to tell stories is to read stories.
Yeah.
And I don't read many business books at all. I tend to read fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And I do so because I enjoy it, but also because I think it helps you learn how to tell a story.
Yeah.
What's your favorite TV commercial then you've seen recently that sticks out for you? Just curious, because it's
the Zillow one.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
But I'll tell you, I'll give you another one. Okay. You're already going to hopefully go look at that Chrysler ad.
I remember it now.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So one of the most famous advertisements of all time was the Coca-Cola ad, 1971. I'd like to buy the world a Coke.
Yeah. I remember that one.
And, the choir singing on this rolling hillside. And it was at a fractious moment in the world and our society. And the world just needs a Coke, man.
Yeah.
And
careful what you say in 71.
Yeah. Right. But if you listen to that ad, the first line of the song is, "I'd like to buy the world a home and furnish it with love."
Ooh.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just let that sink in.
Yeah.
We are in the business of homes. If we can't figure out how to tell a story around that, shame on us.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there were a bunch of hippies in the early 70s. That's what we've learned today. I want to furnish my house with love. You probably need a chair and a bed, though, too.
Yeah.
I'm just saying.
Well, you know what, though? I think that's a good way to end the pod. It's a great line. I hope that everyone listening to this takes this as a starting point for how do they change their approach to the consumer.
Yep.
And Brian, as always, great content. Just, thank you for all the stuff you're saying. I know I watch you on stage fighting for the industry like everyone else. And NAR, wink, wink, you should reach out to 1000 Watt.
Yeah. Consult with somebody.
Well, yeah. Well, listen, look, thank you guys. And, since we're patting each other on the back, what you guys do is tremendous. Keep saying things and not worry about if you're right or who's going to get mad, and just speaking to the moment. You guys do it well.
We're trying to figure out what gets us canceled now. So
we get closer. We get closer every show. Yeah. Oh, and we'll put all the commercials in the show notes if you want to watch those. We'll make sure we put them all in the show notes. Yep.
Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you so much.
We'll have you back again on soon. So
thanks,
guys. My friend.
Appreciate you.
It's our job to say out loud what everybody's only thinking to themselves. It's your job to subscribe to this podcast so you never miss an episode.